Today's subject is what unfolds on a karmic level when a narcissist loses an empath. My name is Daniel Gleeman, and today I want to explore a deeper psychological and spiritual reality that many people miss. On the surface, it may appear to be an ordinary breakup, just another relationship coming to an end. Yet beneath the actions, beneath the ego, beneath the pride, there is an energetic dynamic that few truly recognize. When someone loses an empath, they are not merely losing a partner. They are losing the emotional regulation they relied upon. They are losing the person who calmed their impulses, contained their volatility, and mirrored back a steadier version of who they were. In terms of emotional intelligence, they are losing an outside anchor for self-awareness. Let's examine this through 4 significant truths. And first, the loss of borrowed illumination. Some people develop inner consciousness. Others depend on outside approval to feel important. An empath frequently offers reassurance, patience, and compassion far beyond what they receive in return. When that source vanishes, the appearance of strength begins to dissolve. Without someone shielding their insecurity, hidden vulnerability becomes visible to others and to themselves. And second, the close of the grace period. Karma is not mystical punishment. It is psychological outcome. When an empath continually forgives, they disrupt the feedback cycle that would normally require growth. They carry the emotional burden. When they finally depart, consequences are no longer cushioned. Behaviors once overlooked now result in isolation, fractured trust, and damage to reputation. The postponement is over. Reality sets in. And third, the revelation of the shadow. While empathy remains present, harmful tendencies are often indirectly contained. The empath that diffuses conflicts, mends social divides, and preserves emotional equilibrium. Once they are gone, those balancing supports disappear. Anger becomes more apparent. Manipulation loses its effectiveness. The constructive persona becomes more difficult to maintain. Without honest reflection, self-deception either deepens or begins to break. And fourth, the encounter with truth. The hardest experience is not rejection. It is self-examination. The emotional and energetic imbalance becomes undeniable. Without anyone left to blame, distract, or project onto, a person must confront their own emotional shortcomings. Growth is possible here, but only when accountability replaces ego. And in here lies the deeper reality. When an empath decides to leave, it is seldom explosive. It is intentional. It marks the moment they choose self-worth over saving someone else. They are not seeking revenge. They are reestablishing internal balance. When emotional light withdraws, what remains is clarity. Not everyone appreciates value while it is present. Yet when someone who consistently gave compassion, patience, and depth chooses serenity instead, the lesson is rarely fleeting. And my name is Daniel Gleeman, and this is what occurs karmically when a narcissist loses an empath. When a narcissist loses an empath, the first thing to crumble is not the partnership, but the unseen framework that was supporting their identity. Empaths instinctively provide emotional affirmation, reassurance, and patience, often well beyond what is returned. They serve as a grounding presence, absorbing stress, easing insecurity, and reflecting back a version of the narcissist that seems self-assured and composed. And however, this confidence is often rooted in outside validation, rather than genuine inner stability. When the empathist chooses to leave, that borrowed reinforcement fades away, and the carefully crafted persona starts to crack. The narcissist may first respond with pride, denial, or apparent indifference, persuading themselves that nothing has changed. Yet as time passes, the quiet absence of admiration grows more noticeable. Without steady affirmation of their value, buried insecurities begin to rise. The lack of emotional cushioning reveals a delicate self-esteem that had been concealed behind charisma or control. This is where karmic consequence unfolds, not as mystical retaliation, but as psychological retaliation, but as psychological unveiling. The energy once projected outward through dominance or manipulation now turns inward. Doubt replaces grandiosity. Reflection replaces diversion. The loss demands a confrontation with the emptiness, the ambience, once unknowingly protected them from, and within that confrontation rests the real lesson. Strength that depends on another person's emotional effort is not true strength. When the external validation disappears, the individual must either cultivate authentic self-awareness or stay confined within cycles of blame and projection. The empath's exit becomes an unavoidable mirror, showing that an identity built on borrowed light cannot endure once that light is removed. And the empath's awakening moment. When an empath ultimately steps back, the emotional investment they once carried does not simply vanish. It flows back to where it began. For a long period, the empath may have taken in criticism, de-escalated conflicts, softened sharp behavior, and repeatedly excused actions that would have ended most bonds. In doing so, they unintentionally postponed consequences. They absorbed emotional turmoil and prevented it from fully returning to its source. But when they depart, that safeguard dissolves. The narcissist remains alone with the impact of their own reactions. They can no longer deflect or conceal. Conversations that once concluded W pursuing its reassurance now close in silence. Behaviors that once received patience now encounter distance. What was once directed outward begins to return inward. This is how psychological karma functions, not through revenge, but through the natural return of unresolved emotion. Without someone to steady their feelings or rationalize their conduct, discomfort grows stronger. The patterns that once felt empowering now feel isolating. The same tactics that once maintained control begin to undermine new relationships. Gradually, avoidance becomes more difficult to maintain. There is no empath to reinterpret events in their favor, no calming presence reframing destructive actions as misunderstood hurt. What remains is the burden of unprocessed emotion and the increasing realization that consequences cannot be deferred forever. Within this space, one of two outcomes unfolds. Either development begins through accountability, or denial sinks deeper into dysfunction. The karmic lesson exists within that decision. When the emotional shield is removed, reality sharpens and clarity calls for responsibility. The empath's withdrawal is not an act of vengeance. It is a rebalancing, allowing each action to meet its natural psychological outcome without interference. When an empath pulls away, the illusion that once safeguarded the narcissist begins to unravel. Empaths often recognize potential and beyond imperfections, trusting that underneath guarded behavior and ego-driven responses, there exists a wounded center capable of transformation. Their faith functions like a beam of light, emphasizing strengths while easing the appearance of flaws. As long as that light remains present, harmful tendencies can stay partly concealed, even from the narcissists themselves. But when the empath withdraws, that protective lens vanishes, the praise diminishes, the emotional shielding disappears. What though? You see someone viewing their behavior through the most charitable perspective, manipulation becomes clear. Inconsistency stands out, and charm begins to lose its influence. The identity that once seemed solid starts to fracture under the pressure of reality. Social facades are challenging to uphold. When the one individual who deeply understood the inner dynamics is no longer there to affirm them, this results in a quiet exposure. The narcissist may try to quickly substitute the lost admiration, chasing new attention or diversions, yet something feels altered, the depth is absent. The reflection lacks familiarity, and in still moments, awareness slowly emerges. They are faced not with direct blame, but with absence, the absence of belief, the absence of unwavering patience, the absence of someone willing to frame their actions as progress unfolding. This is where the karmic lesson deepens. Illusions can withstand critique, but they falter in the face of indifference. When the empath's light no longer highlights their potential, the shadow remains alone, unfiltered, and unmistakable. Within that space, truth cannot be avoided. Change becomes possible, but only if honesty replaces ego and accountability takes the place of blame. And the most significant karmic shift does not happen at the instant of separation, but in the silent period that follows, when distractions fade and only truth remains. When an empath steps away, they carry with them an emotional richness that is not easily duplicated. They offered presence, careful listening, intuitive perception, and an uncommon ability to connect beneath surface-level exchanges. Initially, the narcissist may attempt to occupy the emptiness quickly, pursuing new admiration, new attention, new reassurance. Outwardly, it may seem as though everything continues as before, yet internally something feels unfamiliar. Substitutes may bring excitement, but not stability. They may provide attention, but not clarity. With time, the difference becomes unmistakable. The empath was never merely another source of validation. They were a grounding presence, a mirror reflecting both virtues and faults with authenticity. Without that mirror, self-examination becomes inevitable. There is no longer anyone absorbing emotional chaos or redefining harmful patterns as temporary shortcomings. What remains is silence. And within that silence, awareness begins to expand. The understanding gradually forms that something exceptional was lost not due to weakness, but because it would no longer accept imbalance. This realization carries the karmic message. It is the awareness that depth cannot be exchanged for distraction, and sincerity cannot be replaced by performance. Whether that insight leads to real transformation depends entirely on the willingness to embrace responsibility. Yet the emptiness that lingers stands as a lasting reminder that when someone who genuinely understands you chooses tranquility over turmoil, it is not the loss of affection. It is the loss of access to something extraordinarily rare,